We're going to give folks just a minute to get in before we get going. Just give folks a few more seconds to join and get situated. And all right, we are at the top of the hour. So, hello, everybody, and welcome to Scam Chat Wednesdays 2026. I'm Strat Maloma with AARP California, where I also serve as the lead for the AARP California Fraud Watch Network, which is a free fraud prevention and education resource that's available to anyone. Our resource is all about helping communities spot and avoid frauds and scams through information, education, resources, and events like the one we're hosting today. Thank you for joining us for our first conversation in the series of weekly interactive fraud prevention and education conversations that we're co-hosting throughout August with our good friends at the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. Speaking of which, it's also my pleasure to welcome Sally Westlake. Sally, would you care to come on and introduce the California Department of Financial Protection and yourself?
Sure, Strat. Uh, Thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, my name is Sally Westlake, and I'm the Target Outreach Specialist for the state agency, Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, or DFPI for short. And we are California's financial regulator. We regulate, license, and oversee your financial institutions, products, and professionals. So please join us on our website at dfpi.ca.gov for more information or call us at 866 275 2677 if you have any questions about financial frauds and scams. And we are so excited to be here again today with Strat, ARP, and our Scam Chat Wednesdays for fifth year in a row. And we are looking forward to an exciting conversation today. Thank you, guests, for joining us as well. Back
Thank
to
you
you,
very
Strat.
much. Thank you very much, Sally. And please, Sally will be our moderator next week. So I hope you'll come back next for next week's conversation on privacy. But we'll share a little bit more towards the end of the call about next week's conversation. So, folks, today we're hosting a special conversation in which we're bringing together the voices of younger and older adults to explore the challenges that each of us face when it comes to fraud and scams. While scammers may change their tactics, they often target every age, people of every age, in terms of scams. And even though they change their tactics, we have different experiences when it comes to fraud and scams, depending on our age. So today we're honored to be joined by speakers from the AARP Fraud Watch Network, as well as students against scams and stay cyber safe. But before I introduce today's guest for today's conversation, I first want to share a few housekeeping items so that'll help us all have an enjoyable and productive call. But today, for audio purposes, please keep yourself muted until I invite you to unmute yourself and come on live. To ask a question, please use the raise a hand feature or put your question in chat. And during our Q&A session, I would invite you to come on live to ask your question. If you're not comfortable coming on live, we'll be happy to do so for you. Lastly, today you're going to hear from speakers from the AARP Fraud Watch Network helpline, as well as students against scams and stay cyber safe. However, please note that the opinions expressed by our speakers and in their slides are those solely of our presenters and may not necessarily represent their agencies. We share this information for educational purposes only. So, about today's topic, let me share a few stats that the FTC has shared in their Consumer Sentinel data book. So younger adults are the most likely age group to lose money when it comes to fraud. In actual fact, the FTC reports that 44% of their frauds that they report include a financial loss. Older adults, on the other hand, are less likely to also report financial losses when it comes to fraud. But however, when they do lose money, it's much higher than younger adults, according to the FTC. Older adults are also reported to lose a median of $1,000 per instance of fraud, whilst younger adults report losing a median of only $417 per instance of fraud. So the big takeaway from those numbers is that, although fraud affects all age groups, older adults typically lose more, However, young adults tend to be targets of fraud more often. So those numbers really remind us that scams affect every generation, no, every generation with little differences. So let's meet our first guest for today's conversation. It's my pleasure to welcome Harrison Lee. He's the founder of Students Against Scams and Scam Help AI, which is a free app built to detect and flag scams targeting older adults. He started it in ninth grade, and when an AI research project led him to confront scams draining senior savings, he responded by teaching tech at local senior living centers. He then scaled up through outreach events, workshops, and seminars across Southern California. Harrison's work has earned recognition from the City of Santa Clarita, the Diamond Challenge, and the NFTE Responsible AI Challenge. Now he's organizing his city's first ever scam prevention conference and researching ways to predict scams before they happen. I must say, Harrison, you have an impressive resume there and a list of accomplishments, and you must really be busy. I don't know how you do it with high school at the same time and doing all this great work. Thanks very much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Schott. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Harrison Lee, and today I want to present a little more about my organization.
So Harrison, can you tell us a little bit about what Students Against Scams all about?
Yes, so we could go to the next slide, please. So yes, Students Against Scams is a student-led 501c3 nonprofit with the main goal of protecting older adults from scams. And we've been doing this through our three main approaches, that being education, outreach, and technology. And we help to give seniors the tool to spot a scam before it affects them. So our first strategy is our education. We could go to the next slide, please. So our education puts free printed resources into seniors' hands. And we are currently in the process of distributing 3,000 copies of our safety guidebook across Santa Clarita through our grant. Alongside, we've created user guides for caregivers and simple awareness pamphlets that people could grab and read in minutes. Secondly, our outreach gets into the community in person. We have run senior booths across Southern California, hosted workshops and seminars where we could walk through real life scams. And later this year, we're planning to host SassoCon, our own local conference dedicated entirely to scam prevention. And lastly, here's our technology, Scam Help AI, our free scam detection app. And it's free through our community's crowdsourcing. So let's say you get a suspicious letter, text, or email. You could paste this or screenshot it, and it'll give you instant risk analysis. And it even has a learning module that breaks down exactly why it's dangerous and what to be careful for when encounters arise. Yes, thank you so much for having us.
Wow, Harrison, I gotta say that's so impressive, the work that you're doing, but also bringing in technology, simple technology to help us in the challenge against frauds and scams. So, what are some of the most common scams that Students Against Scams is currently seeing and concerned about, especially as it relates to younger and older adults? Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yes. So the main way I'm seeing scams affect my friends in my age group are through text, and that's either through phishing or fake job offerings. And a lot of the scams are built around urgency, or they're saying like you have to act now, or your account is locked and you need to send some money immediately. And that pressure is what gets people, even young people, to urgently send money without them having a second thought about it. And with the new AIs, scammers are able to make better looking scams that look so real that the danger is of obvious fake messages are now becoming more and more convincing and tricking younger and younger generations.
Wow, that's really great to know. You're growing up in an age of AI and technology, where it's just something that you grew up with, and you're employing that to to counter all these frauds and scams. It really is a different approach. So, as a young adult, can you share a little bit about how fraud and scams have maybe affected you or your peers? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I would say, like, even as a young adult and being on technology more, that still doesn't save you or protect you from getting scammed. And I think there's a little bit of false sense of security that because we're more tech savvy, people assume that growing up online makes you immune from scams. But scammers know that too. They just use different types of bait, using job offers to desperate young adults, phishing links disguised as like normal apps, or DMs, direct messages that look like they're from a friend. And that false confidence can actually make younger adults more vulnerable and have their guard down.
Thank you,
Um,
Harris. Go
yes.
ahead.
Oh, and I would just like to add that with our age being in the age of AI, we're more comfortable enough with the technology we have to create technologies that also help detect scams. And that's why we started Students Against Scams. And we use that same instinct to protect people who don't have that technological edge yet.
Thank you, Harrison, for providing us such great insights. It's an eye opener for me too. Even though I've worked in fraud prevention for a while, but also kind of to hear from your perspective and the challenges that you and your peers are going through.
Mhm.
So thank you. Stick around. I know we're going to have some more questions later on. Let's now. It's now my pleasure to welcome my second guest for today's conversation. Joining us also is Neil Chandra, who is the co-founder of
Hey
Stay
everyone.
Cyber Safe. Hi, Neil.
Hey.
Thank you for being on. Just a little bit about Neil, about Stay Cyber Safe. It's a student-led cybersecurity initiative dedicated to helping older adults stay safe online through practical, engaging cybersecurity education. Inspired by the growing number of scams targeting older adults, Neil helped build the Stay Cyber Safe into a student-led movement that partners with the San Diego County District Attorney County offers to educate communities on emerging cyber threats and fraud. Today's cyber safety, today, cyber safe, cyber safe delivers workshops, educational resources, and an interactive iOS training app for older adults with student-led chapters, expanding its impact across the United States and internationally. The initiative has been recognized by the U.S. House of Representatives for its work protecting older adults from cyber crimes. Neil is a rising senior at Del Norte High School and an AFA Cyber Patriot National Award winner and an Eagle rank candidate. Congratulations, Neil. You're also as busy as Harrison.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for being on, Neil. So, Neil, similar to Harrison, can you just take a moment and tell us a little bit about staying cyber safe?
For sure. Yeah. So Stay Cyber Safe is a student-led organization dedicated to helping seniors protect themselves from cybercrime and scams. My brother Rowan and I started it because we kept hearing about seniors in our own community losing money to scams. Fake tech support calls, romance scams, grandparent scams, and we realized this is one of the most underserved areas in cybersecurity education. Most resources out there are built for younger, tech-savvy people, not for seniors. So we built a curriculum specifically for them and deliver it through free in-person workshops, plus a free iOS app that reinforces what we teach so seniors have something to check back on between sessions. We started as one chapter here in San Diego, now has grown across the United States and internationally.
Thank you. And I asked Hassan the same question. What are some of the common scams that Stay Cyber Safe is currently seeing and that they're concerned about, similar, as they relate to older adults and older as well as younger adults? What are you most concerned about in terms of scams that you're seeing?
Right. So the one we're seeing with increasing frequency right now, and this actually comes from working closely with the San Diego DA's Elder Abuse Prosecution Unit, is spoofed calls that look like they're coming from the victim's own bank, saying there are unauthorized charges on their account. The scammer tells them to either withdraw cash immediately to protect it from being stolen, or that a courier is going to come pick up their debit or credit card to help with the investigation. What makes this one so effective and honestly kind of alarming is where the scammers are getting their information. They're buying victims' personal data on dark web marketplaces, so when they call, they can reference a real charge you actually made a couple of days ago, and that instantly makes them sound legitimate. That's what gets people to hand over their card or move their money. Beyond that, we're still seeing the more familiar ones too. Grandparent scams, tech support scams, romance scams. But this bank spoofing one is the newest and fastest growing threat we're tracking.
Thank you. And cyber criminals often rely on human behavior rather than maybe technical vulnerabilities. So, what are some of would you say are some most of the common online habits that unknowingly put us at risk? What kind of behaviors do we have that maybe we should think twice about?
Right, right. So cyber criminals usually aren't breaking through a firewall. They're exploiting how people are wired to trust and to respond fast. A few habits we see across every age group: reusing the same password everywhere, so one breach exposes everything; trusting caller ID or a familiar looking email without verifying who's actually on the other end; and reacting immediately to anything that feels urgent. Your account will be suspended, your grandson needs bail money right now, instead of pausing and calling like a trusted person first. That pause is really the whole thing we try to teach. Scammers are counting on you not to take that pause.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Neil. I now want to welcome our our third and final guest. Joining us is Mark Federhoff, who's with the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Mark serves as a senior advisor with the AARP Fraud Watch Network. He also worked on education and outreach to older adults for over 15 years. He currently works with a crew of dedicated volunteers to address thousands of inquiries each month about fraud and scams and financial exploitation as part of the work that he does with the AARP Fraud Watch Network Helpline. Thank you, Mark, for being here.
Hey, Strat, thanks for having me.
Great. So, Mark, tell us a little bit about what you're hearing on the Fraud Watch Network.
Yeah, for sure. Much like Harrison and Neil were talking about, scams are kind of coming from all directions. The majority of people who we're hearing about frauds and scams reporting to us are older adults, but we also get people of all ages kind of reporting different types of frauds and scams too. Sometimes people are calling for themselves, sometimes they're calling for a loved one. And plenty of AARP members are contacting us and telling us about the types of things they're dealing with out there. I did pull kind of our most recent data from the helpline from California that I'm just going to throw in the chat right now, just so you all can see kind of what we're hearing from real live reporters in California. As you can imagine, there's obviously more more folks in California than any other state. So we get a pretty good share of reports from California. You can again in the chat you can kind of see what we're seeing. Identity theft is really hot right now, and we're seeing a wide variety of different types of identity theft. Around again, I think some of the things that the guys were talking about with relation to imposter bank scams as well, and people kind of getting pulled in via text messages with regards to pretending that they're banks, sometimes also loans that we're seeing as well. Imposter business scams again, kind of number two on that list. Many of those are bank related scams or maybe shipping entities. Major retailers are as well are being used regularly. You can then see the online dating and romance scam and the tech support scams, and then the sweepstakes, prize, and lottery to kind of round out the top five. And really, right now, one of the major trends that we've been seeing on the helpline, and this is one that doesn't involve as much technology as some of the other scams that we're seeing, are those sweepstakes, prize, and lottery scams. kind of the scam that seems to never go away, but scammers are continuing to pretend to be Publishers Clearinghouse and telling people they won a big old prize, and they just need to send a little bit of money to receive that money, whether it be for fake taxes or shipping for a vehicle or something like that. But there's just a snapshot of kind of what we're seeing on the helpline in our world, and I'm sure quite a bit of it is the same that other organizations are hearing about as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, and one scam that's always kind of um, interesting to see how it's always in the top 10 list is the Publishing Clearinghouse. It has been around for a while, but it continues to remain on the top 10 list. So
Yeah,
interesting to see that.
we've seen calls almost triple this year so far from last year. And so we just know it's still out there. Publishers Clearinghouse was an entity that filed for bankruptcy last year, but at the same time, they still exist. They were purchased by a holding company. But I mean, scammers don't necessarily know all that, and they're still continue to use that name. And so again, it's still something that a name that a lot of people, especially older adults, remember from. I remember it when I was a kid growing up too, getting junk in the mail.
So Mark, just for the benefit of some folks who may not know about how the Publishing Clearinghouse scam tends to work, can you give us maybe a short run through about how that scam typically works?
Yeah, it's typically a phone call almost all the times, and this is why again there's a little bit less technology maybe used in it than some of the other scams. I've heard of it come as a text message and as a like a direct message as well and on social media. But generally speaking, it's a phone call saying that you won $2.5 million in a new Mercedes or some variation of that. And you need to at the bottom line though is you have to pay some sort of money to receive that money, and that should always be the bright red flag of a scam. But it's again one of these a little bit less technologically sophisticated scams that is just different than the text message scams and the email scams and the social media scams that we're seeing, just because most of it still operates over the phone.
Yeah, absolutely. So Neil and Harrison spoke about the scams that they're concerned about and hearing, but also kind of what their peers are also concerned about and hearing. Oftentimes, many people assume that scams primarily target older adults. Yet fraud really, we've come to learn that fraud really, affects virtually every age group. So, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about people being targeted by scams? Why and why do you think that these misconceptions persist?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times people just have the general assumption that scams are only going after older adults, which is definitely not true. And these guys can tell us about it just as well as I can. They're casting a very wide net, and they're trying to find anybody and who's going to respond to them and give them personal information, or get caught up in some type of a ruse. And I just think that generationally people get caught in different types of situations. I think just as an example, a lot of older adults get caught up in tech support scams because they are avoiding dealing with any of their kind of technological difficulties. They don't want to deal with different types of technology in some situations. And so they get a phone call or they get a message from someone saying they're happy to help them fix their computer or their phone or their tablet, and they're very excited because they're just like, oh, it's someone else who can deal with it in a lot of ways. But in the same respect, I think a lot of younger adults might get caught up in certain types of scams too, because they're very comfortable with it and they're assuming that they can kind of navigate it in different ways. And I've seen kind of examples in both ways across the helpline. Just for example, like we'll see a lot more younger people sending money via peer-to-peer payment apps like Venmo or Zelle or Cash App, because it's a common form of payment that we might use to send money to our friends or split concert tickets or split dinner or split a ride. Where there might be some older adults who are more leery of sending money that way because they just haven't done it as much before. And so I think just looking for those types of differences, I think, is really important. and also, making sure that, I mean, and again, what Harrison and Neil are doing, sharing information kind of across the spectrum of folks, I think is really important, and making sure that people understand kind of those lessons that we can learn along the way.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's really commendable the work that all three of you are doing, to educate and protect communities from frauds and scams. I also find it both saddening and heartening that there's a need for folks to jump in this way. Looking at Neil and Harrison, that young adults are also now being so affected by fraud and scams that they're organizing to fight back on it. So that's heartening, but disheartening that part of it is that they need to do that. But big congratulations. So Mark, let me ask you this. You speak to hundreds of people on the Fraud Watch Network, and I think maybe Harrison O'Neill touched a little bit on this, why maybe younger folks are also, being successfully targeted with fraud and scams. Are there certain emotional tactics that scammers are using effectively today, that make them so successful when they try and do their criminal acts of defrauding or scamming someone?
Yeah, and I think both Neil and Harrison both mentioned urgency as part of the situation, and that really is the paramount of a lot of scams. Urgency and fear are two tactics that the scammers are using. They want you to act without thinking, and they want you to act also in like in a solo way too. A lot of the times, what scammers are telling you to do is not to tell anyone else what you're doing, or not give you a chance to tell anyone else what you're doing, because that person who you talk to, whether it be someone on a helpline or someone, a friend or neighbor or family member or partner, telling you or asking questions about the situation that you're in. And so when you have that extra person who you can kind of integrate into the conversation about what you think might be a scam, you have a really good chance of defeating it, because that person is going to ask maybe critical questions that you are maybe not going to ask yourself, because you're so caught up in that ether or the excitement around the fraud that's going on, or the perceived idea that this person is going to help you or get you out of trouble or give you a bunch of money. And so I think that having that person, in addition, to any education that you receive, but having a trusted person to talk to about these situations is really great, and something that we should all, no matter what age we are, have kind of in our lives to again make sure that we can avoid these types of things and get our head back on straight instead of getting stuck in these terrible scams.
Absolutely. I think it's I think I second that. Always good to have somebody to bounce it off or to check in with. So speaking of being a successful target, being successfully targeted by a fraud or a scam, what do you think are some important steps that somebody should immediately take, if they find themselves a target of a fraud or a scam? And I'll also have Harrison and Neil also kind of think about how what they recommend to their communities if somebody tells them, "Hey, I've been a target of a fraud or scam. What do you do?" But Mark, let's start with you, and then we'll hear from Harrison, then we'll hear from Neil in terms of that.
Yeah, just a few things right away that we tell people on the helpline, especially if the scam involves their financial institution, is, I mean, I've told people to get off the phone with me right now because they need to talk to their bank since they haven't already. And so that's a common thing. Bank or financial institution, wherever your money is, I think is really important to have those conversations. I also think just being proactive about identity theft is really important. I know, it was mentioned earlier about the dark web, and the reality is that whether we've been part of data breach or information's been targeted on the dark web, that type of a thing, it's probably safe to make an assumption that your personal or financial information is out there in some way, shape, or form, and taking as many steps as possible to protect your identity, like checking your annual credit report, placing fraud alerts and credit freezes, are all really important things to do. And we direct so many people to identitytheft.gov and the credit reporting bureaus just because, again, we want people to be taking proactive steps. So if they do get a notification about maybe a loan, someone inquiring about a loan in their name or something like that, that hopefully it was a denial rather than someone who actually got the loan in their name. But I'm sure you guys have plenty to share too.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so I could go now.
Yes, please.
So if anyone's getting like targeted from scams, my best advice is to always just seek help from a second set of eyes. And when I talk to older adults and even younger adults, I would say that trusting like your parent or your like someone, maybe your like son or daughter, is a great way to make sure that everything is authenticized and just like ensured that being targeted isn't just um, happening because you're being proactive or like being urgent, um, and just like taking a step back, stopping, thinking, and then verifying is just like a good three-step process on just making sure you aren't getting your financially stolen. Yeah.
Great advice. Thank you very much, Harrison. Neil, anything from your end, Ted?
Yeah. I'll kind of echo the same sentiment. Be proactive, take a pause, take a real look at it, and yeah, contact, trusted adults, maybe a son or daughter. And also that link that was sent in chat, identitytheft.gov, is a great link and resource to look at. So yeah.
Great, great. Thank you all. Okay, let me check in chat and see whether we have any questions from our audience for the great speakers. I appreciate everybody sending being with us today and sharing their insights and their experience. Okay, let's see here. All right, Janine Madden, would you like to come on and ask your question? I think you have a question about Bitcoin and Bitcoin ATMs.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you for being on.
Sure. So yeah, I know that we have the issue of Bitcoin comes up often. And so just explaining to seniors primarily, I'm in a role where I can do some advocacy. And so just explaining to seniors about what Bitcoin is and how to avoid Bitcoin scams. I know that there's a Bitcoin button right in Venmo. So, my mom's 80 and she uses Venmo a lot and asks me about the Bitcoin piece, and just crypto in general. And then also how to address the dark web and how to prevent people from falling victim to their information being disseminated on the dark web.
Wonderful. Thank you for this question. Anybody who care to jump in? So I would say that the one thing I think we are lucky in California about is that the California Privacy Protection Agency just recently is launching the drop tool, the delete report, the opt-out tool, which at least allows you to choose to opt out of data sharing and what data of yours that you share online can be collected and used by data brokers or sold by data brokers because they collect that information. Who knows how safe it is where they keep it? What if they're hacked? Does that put you in a vulnerable place? So I think for a start, for folks to have that tool, it can also be helpful in terms of managing your personal information that you share online and who has access to it and who can report it. It also lets you correct. It also lets you opt out and delete information that may not be correct about you. On the crypto side, Mark, Neil, Harrison, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, cryptocurrency really for the last 5 years or so has been a really common way that scammers are requesting money, and we started seeing that on the helpline maybe even longer than 5 years ago. But I think that again, we're seeing states across the country now, and AARP has been heavily involved in this, but working on regulation around cryptocurrency ATMs, just because there's so many people who are kind of inserting money into those machines without knowing exactly what they're doing, and with the perceived thought that they are avoiding some type of fraud situation or being in trouble for different reasons. I think a good general rule is if you're ever directed to a cryptocurrency ATM, to pay a fine for something or send money for something that you're not sure of what you're doing. It's a bright red flag of a scam. Cryptocurrency in some worlds, in some people's world is an investment mechanism that they use. There's a lot of volatility. I think it's important to remember that. But again, if you're getting involved with cryptocurrency and putting and it's not for some type of legitimate investment opportunity that you believe is fair, I think it's very important to avoid it. And I will say that anecdotally too, so far on our helpline, we are hearing and I think it's greatly because of the amount of regulations that's happening in different states across the country right now. Is that we're hearing less requests for cryptocurrency payments via cryptocurrency ATM and more reverting back to gift cards, because we know gift cards are everywhere and there's less regulations around gift cards. And so again, we've been seeing kind of a shift back to some of the other traditional forms of payment that are associated with scams, more so than just the cryptocurrency that we hear about.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to invite Sally, speaking about financial regulator. Um, Sally, if you want to come on and also jump the way in.
Yeah, Mark, great information there. Thank you for sharing that. So in California, the legislatures passed a law that restricts any crypto ATM operator to accept more than $1,000 from a person within 24 hours. So if a scammer instructs you to go to a crypto machine, and they know exactly where these crypto machines are at, whether it's a liquor store or the gas station, hidden in the back, and they instruct you to go there, just know you're not allowed to put in more than $1,000. And if the ATM accepts more than that, that is a problem. That's against the law in California, and it should be reported to us. Also, the receipt that you get from that machine is supposed to detail specific information and all information that is necessary for you to make that purchase and transaction from that crypto Bitcoin ATM kiosk. Now, having said that, effective July 1 of 2026, there was a new law that passed in California that now all crypto Bitcoin um, processors, whether it's a business or a professional that is selling transactions, doing business in crypto, have to be licensed and registered with us at the DFPI. So they may not have a full license number yet, but they had to have submitted their application to do business within the state of California. So again, if you're considering investing in crypto, great, but do your research. Don't take somebody else's word for it that this is great, this is a new hot buy, and you're going to double your money in a week. Okay? Do your research, contact us, go on our website, check our crypto scam tracker. Make sure you're doing business with a legitimate business. And I know somebody mentioned, was it Cal Privacy and Drop Program Strat? Remember,
Yes,
they're joining us. They're our guest speakers next week. So if you have
absolutely.
any questions about Drop, um, data breaches, and how to get your name off marketing lists and your information from being sold from different marketing companies to another, join us next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sally. I'm going to invite Martina. Martina, you have a question about government entities and payments, and I think this will also be a great opportunity, maybe Mark, to talk a little bit about, the gift card, the work that we've done, educating people about the payment methods, how those can be red flags for a scam, the way that this scammers may be asking you for payment. Martina, are you on?
Yeah, hi, I'm on. I'm just thinking that anybody who contacts you and says, you have a penalty, there's a fee, something again with urgency or panic, that if they're asking for cryptocurrency to make this payment, I do not believe government agencies of any type would ask for crypto as a payment because it's not legal tender.
Thank you very much for sharing that comment. Great information. Mark, care to talk about uh, payment methods, how those can be red flags?
Yeah, I'll just say, I think that's a very important point, Martina. And I will say that scammers can be very tricky in these situations too, and they might call it something different. And they're going to call it maybe a payment machine. I've talked to people who have been involved in jury duty scams, for instance, where they're told that, they missed jury duty and they need to pay a fine, but they can only pay a fine by showing up, at the gas station or at the grocery store and put money into those machines, and that person is, whoever the person is who's instructing it, the scammer, is knowledgeable about what those machines look like, and so they direct that person who is also, in fear, and they do those things, not even knowing that they're using crypto. They're just given perfect instructions. So we do see, some deception on that side too with regards to some of these scams. Additionally, though, if you are, again, asked to pay in a form of payment that's not familiar to you, and it's in some type of urgent nature, I think it's really important that just like everyone's kind of said today, important to take that pause and do a little bit of research, turn back around and make sure that you maybe contact the entity directly rather than with any type of phone number or other communication that you have. I think that again, the method of payment that's requested is always changing. And again, the cryptocurrency has been a really good example of one where states have taken some initiative and put in legislation where they're not able to lose so much money at once. At the beginning, 5 years ago, we were hearing people losing $20,000 or $30,000 as part of these transactions, and now the limits are much greater and making sure that people aren't being able to lose as much. I think again, the peer-to-peer payment apps are a way that scammers are targeting a lot of folks because it's a quick way to pay. The gift cards again are easily accessible, and so being really really cautious about anyone requesting payment via gift card, I think is really important as well. Again, gift cards should be used as gifts. They shouldn't be used as any type of payment method unless that's the way that you manage kind of your life and you buy $500 gift cards at a time to do your payments or however you do it. But again, we just see a lot of these types of things. I would say that again, scammers, their probably preferred payment method is getting information about your payment, about your bank accounts and about your credit cards, and trying to just make direct purchases or directly take money out of accounts that way. And so that's why it's extra important that we're keeping our bank and financial information extra safe.
Thank you very much, Mark. Great advice. Neil, Harrison, are you seeing anything similar around payment methods, or that you're concerned about, or that you want to share?
I don't have much to add, but I just want to add that a lot of payment methods often just go under the radar. That like one way could even be having to pay in like gold bars. I've heard like going to Costco, buying gold bars and like putting it in a paper brown bag and having like someone pick it up. And just like those types of untraceable types of payments are being more and more prevalent just to keep these operations just under the radar and untraceable.
Thank you. Thank you. Great point. Yes, also heard about that. Neil, anything from your side
Yeah, I would just say be super wary and really cautious whenever anyone asks you to pay in a way that's unorthodox, gift cards, like Harrison said, gold or, crypto, anything like that, just, take a second to really assess the situation.
Yeah. Ask them if they take check. All right. Most likely will tell you no. All right. So a question for both Neil as well as Harrison. So young adults often viewed as digital savvy, yet they too, we hear, are often being targeted increasingly by sophisticated scams. Why does, being digitally fluent, having digital fluency not always translate into maybe being able to be scam resistant or being able to pick up or identify or protect yourself from fraudulent scams?
Well, it can mean that, that digital fluency can also mean that you're a lot more comfortable with the systems and you have greater trust in the technology and the services you're using. So, that kind of, confidence in what you're using can kind of translate to being overconfident and blindly trusting these scams and falling for these scams.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Harrison, anything from your end?
yeah, I would just like reverberate what he just said. Just being online so much, there's often just never like time to really stop and think about what I'm looking at online because I'm just like more tech savvy. I'm like maybe you're feeling more confident and that like just like arrogance can lead to just being scammed unexpectedly. Yeah.
Great, great. Let's talk a little bit about AI because I think it's just so much out there right now. Voice generated AIs, fake videos, personalized messages. Are those things that your colleagues, your community is seeing and concerned about?
Yeah, I could go ahead and talk. So I've just been seeing that AI has been more prevalent on social medias. And one example I could point to is like fake Elon Musk AI deepfakes. And I've actually been out at our outreach event in Thousand Oaks. And there's actually this one lady who still believes that Elon Musk is giving her Tesla, but just because of these new technologies, it's becoming more and more hard to detect when something's real or fake. But that I would say AI is like a double-edged sword where it could be both harmful but also a great like learning resource. And what I've developed, and I know there's a bunch of other tools online, there's just been a lot more strategies to prevent AI with the same new technologies.
Thank you, Harrison
Yeah.
and Neil.
Yeah. Harrison's absolutely right. AI is super prominent, especially because it's just so accessible. You can easily access any of those commercial AI models or LLMs and then generate a video or audio. So one of the really common scams we're seeing, coinciding with this rise in AI is the where they'll grab like audio clips from online of like a grandson or granddaughter and then contact the grandma or grandpa saying that, pretending to be the grandson in jail, for example. Yeah, and then asking for like money to help bail them out and everything. And then because it sounds exactly like the grandson or granddaughter, the grandparent might be super incentivized and really want to help out. And then that's where they get you with this sense of urgency and then this emotional involvement. So
Yeah. Yeah. And if I had to ask, both of you get to speak and get to do a lot of community presentations and speaking with folks who have different experiences with frauds and scams. So, in the instance that maybe they share with you that they have a relationship with Elon Musk or some actor that's kind of AI generated, etc. Um, what challenges are you facing any challenges trying to convince folks that, hey, this is AI, this is not a real person sending you the Tesla or expressing romantic interests? How are you sort of dealing with communicating or convincing somebody who
Y-
may share that?
Yeah, so I'll just say it's being really difficult to just help people recognize that they are being scammed because I think just the to emotional attachment issue is one thing, but even after realizing people have been scammed, they've become so invested into like this fake relationship that they continue on with this. And this is a problem throughout romance scams, where even after finding out that this person may not be real, they still continue speaking when isolation is so bad that they want to just like continue having a relationship, even though they know it's financially hurting them.
Thank you. Great to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
Neil,
It's a more of a, in denial kind of thing, you know. But I've got to say that a lot of the seniors I've talked to have kind of realized it was a scam, because, bots have been around for a while now, even if AI is something relatively new. So.
okay. And Mark, anything that you that you can add or based on your experience and what you hear on the helpline?
Yeah, I think that I mean it's funny that you guys also mentioned Elon Musk, but I will say that in terms of any deep fakes that we hear about on the helpline are almost always Elon Musk. I really tried to instill in folks that the richest person in the world is not trying to talk to any of us right now and offer us things. Unfortunately, though, I know that it can be difficult because we want to believe all these things are true, and I think that also, some of I would say some of the most prominent kind of AI related fraud that we're seeing right now seems to just be in messaging. I think that in terms of the text messages that we see and the emails that we're seeing that are coming from scammers, posing as businesses or other types of entities or maybe even a relationship, the spelling, the grammar, the punctuation, much better than it ever was before. I think those used to be kind of bright red flags for us as we're navigating the world of fraud, especially in our spam and junk mail, but now text messages as well. And so, they have scammers have these tools, and if they're not using them, they're very lazy. They're lazy scammers, and they and I think that we're just seeing a lot of evidence that again scammers are using the basic AI related tools, especially scammers who might not have English as their first language, and talking to us from the other side of the world, are they're doing that and doing so in a way that they can clean up that message, and still you have to look harder and read more into the message than ever before, because again you're not just looking for misspellings and bad punctuation and grammar. You're looking for what they're asking me to do, what the ask is in that situation, how they're wanting to communicate, how they're wanting them to be paid. And those are all the things that we need to start looking for in those messages, not just the errors that we're used to kind of picking up along the way.
Wonderful. Let's go one more time and look at any questions in chat. Okay. So folks, let me ask, and especially Neil and Harrison, are robocalls, text messages, are those concerns that younger folks are kind of concerned about? I know I get bombarded with text messages, always weary about them being the entrance to a scam. I also assume younger people are more comfortable with their devices. It seems to be a main source of communications. They're more comfortable texting as opposed to talking on the phone. So are they dealing with text challenges, concerned about text related scams and things like that?
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely a concern. You'll see a lot of like text message scams. I get a lot, purporting to be from the DMV. I don't even drive yet. Uh, but yeah, so that's a really common one. I'd say that once you see them like a couple times, you kind of start to catch on. But even then, it's still a concern. If they keep sending it out, it's clearly working on some people. So.
Harrison, anything from your end?
Yeah, so I would say that for calls, they're usually not a problem for me. And just like anytime I see an unknown number or scam likely number, I often just deny or just actually not deny. Just let it go through, make sure it's not your phone's not being traced as a live number. And with text, I just like don't respond, see it, delete it. But yeah, it's been prevalent more and more through text, I would say, but it hasn't really been effective for me.
Thank you. Thank you. And I hope you'll tune in next week as we talk about data privacy, but especially about the drop tool, because I think that's going to be something that everybody is going to want to take advantage of in a way to protect their information online. We do so much online, so it would be really a great tool. I think for both younger folks as well as older adults to be aware of. Mark, do you want to weigh in anything with on text messages, robocalls?
I mean, I think it's just important that we remember that the text messages, scammers know this is how we're talking. Everyone's talking to their friends and family via text message, and they want eyes on their message, and they want a response to their message. And so I again just think that the texts are what we need to be really vigilant of right now. I think again we have tools that are maybe a little bit better right now to warn us about scam phone calls, and we have better spam and junk folders and filters than we used to in our emails. And so those text messages are really like the loophole that scammers are looking for. And I think just being very judicious about who you're responding to, and if something doesn't seem right, it's a good idea just to delete it. And I don't know. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I think text is going to be kind of the hot way scammers are trying to get a hold of us, and so just be really cautious.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, let's we have a few seconds left before we move to wrapping it up. So if you had to leave folks with one word of advice or experience that you want to share that might be helpful to our audience, what would it be? Or if you want to share your resources, your link, or your organizations, please feel free to do so. Harrison, do you want to kick us off? Any last piece of advice that you want folks to take away or to know to help them in
Um,
their fraud prevention journey?
yeah, so just to sum it up, I think everyone kind of got the same message of just to take a step back, like pause and verify. And one resource I could recommend, besides like going to FTC and all the other online resources, is just having a second set of eyes. And if you don't have one like available in person, I would just recommend using an AI assisted tool. And if it's too like hard to just initially use AI, I would recommend our tool, which is on studentsagainstscams.org under scam help, and it'll just help streamline just how to use AI to detect scams.
Thank you, Harrison.
Yeah.
Neil?
Yeah. So, if you guys want to visit our website, staycybersafe.us, there's a lot of really helpful resources on there. I've also got an iOS app called Stay Cyber Safe, which is kind of like a gamified testing kind of learning experience. So feel free to download that off the iOS App Store. And yeah, final piece of advice, stay vigilant.
Thank you. Thank you. Mark, anything from your end?
Yeah, no, I mean, just first of all, kudos to Harrison and Neil. Again, really appreciate the work you guys are doing and keeping people safe out there. Very admirable, especially as high school guys. Continue the work because it's not going anywhere. Not going away. Just remember that, and I'll say that again. Just remember AARP's Fraud Watch Network helpline is always available. We have about 150 volunteers nationwide who are happy to help out and help kind of get you in the right state of mind. The phone number is 877-908-3360. And so feel free to call anytime.
Thank you to Mark, to Neil, as well as to Harrison. I really appreciate you folks joining us today. Mark with the AARP Fraud Watch Helpline, Harrison Lee with Students Against Scams, and then also Neil Chandra with Stay Cyber Safe. Appreciate all the insights and all the advice that they shared today. Thank you to my colleagues behind the scenes for making things move along, Marissa, and also to Sally with the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, who will be moderating next week's conversation. So I hope you join the same time. On your screen, you will see some resources that you can turn to if ever you have a question about fraud and scams. Please feel free to check in there. I also want to thank you for joining us today for today's conversation, for sharing your comments, asking your questions, also your advice. As I say, I hope you found this conversation helpful and that you'll join us next week for our protecting your privacy and data online. In the meantime, as Mark mentioned, if you do have questions about fraud or scam, please feel free to reach out to our AARP Fraud Watch helpline, which you can reach on 877-908-3360, or simply visit aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork. Thank you very much and goodbye, everybody.